Bottled Water is a proud sponsor of WSOE. Water and water coolers are available for homes and businesses in the Elon-Burlington area. For more information, call 336-584-8822.
This is the Slaw Sports Show on Anchor.fm. Weekly episodes highlighting and breaking down the biggest stories across sports. Make sure to keep up with the latest episodes and breaking news on Twitter by following @Slaw Sports Show to keep up to date with the latest breaking news around the NFL. Official site of the show, knoble87.wixsite.com/Slaw Sports Report. And now, here's your host, Cole Noble.
What is going on, everyone? Happy Friday and welcome to the Slaw Sports Show here on the last 2 hours of a feel-good Friday and of another great week. And as always, it is 10 o'clock on the dot and it's time for the Slaw Sports Show. So I'm your host, Cole Noble, aka Slaw, and I just want to say welcome to the show. In the past, we always start off the episodes with our Slaw's main card pick'em of the week. But this week, we're in the Bellator, so no UFC Fight Night on Saturday. So instead, we're not going to be giving our pick'em of the week, where we pretty much need a break from my Slaw's pick'em of the week. For those who know, we're sitting here at a 4-4 record overall on our main card pick'em of the week. So it's a good time to step back for a minute and readjust and figure out what we're going to be doing going forward. But nevertheless, we still got some UFC we got to talk about. Coming out from today, Dustin Poirier has signed on for his July 10th fight against Conor McGregor. So we get Poirier-McGregor 3. It's now official. So it's going to be a great fight coming up over the summer. I'm excited to see McGregor. I'm always excited to see him back in the octagon. But I want to see now how he's going to respond after losing to losing to Poirier last time. I want to see how he responds in July and comes back against Poirier. But that's pretty much all we have for UFC this week. So no in-depth pick'em of the week this time. Instead, we're just going to keep things simple with this Poirier versus McGregor bout. So instead, we're going to start off the episode this week in the MLB. Everyone knows I'm not that big of a MLB guy, not that big of a baseball guy. But yesterday was opening day, so it calls for a little differency here on the Slaw Sports Show. So we're going to be talking about some baseball to kick off the first little bit of this week's episode until we move on with the rest of what we want to talk about and what's on deck for today. So just looking up what is on deck, we're going to be talking about some NFL new agreements that are getting passed running into this season and into the future for the NFL. Looking at some headlines in the NFL, what we got going on with some quarterback news, and then kind of wrapping it up with some teams and previewing the season ahead. Looking at some teams that I think should see some improvement and definitely will need to improve going into next season. But before we get to all that in the NFL, let's start with opening day. Opening day started yesterday, first pitch. The MLB is back, ready for a full season. And we saw a lot of great moments already through the first day. Today was the second day. Saw a couple great moments today as well with the game still going on. Was checking out the games before I came over here into the studio. But yesterday we saw a lot of great moments. And to kick it off, let's just start with Detroit Tigers going up against the Cleveland Indians. Miguel Cabrera hit the first home run of the season. There's a lot of payout for that bet one. But he kicked it off. First home run of the season in the snow in that game. So right now, Cabrera's sitting at 488 home runs on his career. 12 shy from that luxurious 500 home run mark. See if he can get there this season. It's looking likely so far from what we've seen from the first game. But just some other best moments, in my opinion, that I saw from yesterday, checking out the games here and there. The Milwaukee Brewers, everyone knows I'm a big Milwaukee fan. I'm a Packers fan. I'm a Bucks fan. So we got to support our Brewers here, too, on the Slaw Sports Show. They had a nice comeback win over the Minnesota Twins, down 5-3 in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs. 2 on second and third. This was a crunch time situation here for the Milwaukee Brewers, and Travis Shaw delivered with a 2-run double, put them ahead, and then Lorenzo Cain slid into home in the bottom of the 10th to win it in extra innings. So the Brewers, already getting the comeback juices and the rally caps rolling on opening day. And things continued with the Atlanta Braves going up against the Philadelphia Phillies as well. Another walk-off here with the Phillies winning 3-2 in the 10th inning. So 2 extra inning games here that we saw walk-offs on. But let's backtrack before we get to the extra innings here with this Braves game. And I want to talk about the Kung Fu Panda, my man Pablo Sandoval, coming in for the Braves, not knowing if he was going to be on the starting lineup this year. But he ended up getting the nod for opening day in the 7th inning, hit a 2-run moonshot. So Kung Fu Panda is still fighting, and Kung Fu action is still going on with the Atlanta Braves. And then we continue throughout the rest of the game. We get to the top of the 10th into extra innings, and Roman Quinn launched a missile out of center field and completely hosed Ozzie Albies at home. That was a really kick start there in extra innings for the Philadelphia Phillies. That really got the juices pumping for them. Just that Quinn, missile launch hose out of center field. And then Sorega came in and walked it off in the bottom of the 10th. So another great game in that one with the Atlanta Braves and the Philadelphia Phillies. The Braves, a team that many are looking at to being a potential favorite to go all the way this year, up there with the New York Yankees and the Los Angeles Dodgers. I have high hopes for the Braves this year. I come from a family of a lot of Braves fans, and just being here in North Carolina, that's pretty much our local team is the Atlanta Braves. So I have a lot of hopes for them going into the season, see if they can piece things together and go on a run. They made one last year, but came up just shy of a World Series berth. So hopefully they get that thing right this year and go on a good run yet again. And some other news that we saw from opening day, we got Ketel Marte for the Arizona Diamondbacks. He went 4 for 4 on opening day. Talk about starting the season off strong against the San Diego Padres. But despite the 4 for 4 performance from Marte, the Dads still won it 8-7 in that one. So the Dads with the Padres, another team that I'm really excited to see this year is the San Diego Padres. Just the moves they've been making. And of course, Fernando Tatis Jr., one of the most electric players and pretty much one of the figureheads of the entire league going into this season. So I'm excited to see a lot of teams this year, which is pretty surprising for those who know me. I'm not traditionally the guy who likes baseball or talks about it that much, but a lot of big storylines this year to keep track of, and a lot of good teams that made a lot of noise. I'm excited to see how their season goes this year. But I talked about the storylines that I'm interested to see out of the MLB this season, and I got 2 of them on paper that I want to talk about. The first one is the New York Yankees, and the big storyline for the New York Yankees is, are they going to go a full season healthy? I mean, Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, Corey Kluber is now there, all guys who year after year always deal with injuries, and it's always hurt the Yankees, especially with Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge the last few years. Once they get toward playoff time and toward the end of the year, those guys always getting injured for long periods of time is what kills this team before they go into the postseason. So can they stay healthy this year? Can they keep the whole gang together and go a full season? And I think if they do, the Yankees could be one of the favorites to win the World Series, as I talked about. Just what they got going on with Kluber and, of course, Garrett Cole in their starting rotation with pitching-wise, and Judge, Stanton, guys on the sticks offensively. Yankees have a lot to work with this year, and the thing's going to be, can they keep the guys on the field? Are they going to keep them healthy for a full season? If they can do that, if they can stay healthy for a full year, I think they could be one of the teams we talk about as potentially being a World Series favorite this year in the MLB. And the other big storyline that's going to be one of my favorites to watch is going to be Shohei Ohtani with the Los Angeles Angels coming back. His return this year, spent the majority of last year injured. He's coming back this year, and all the MLB experts right now are predicting a 450 at-bat, 100-inning pitch season out of Ohtani, which will be absolutely incredible. With those kind of stats, 450 at-bats, over 100 innings pitched, we're now looking at Babe Ruth numbers back with the Boston Red Sox. So this is going to be insane, and he's going to be a dynamic player all around for the LA Angels this year. And, we talk about Mike Trout always being year in, year out an MVP favorite. we might end up turning the page and looking at Shohei Ohtani this year with the Angels being a potential MVP favorite. He's going to be starting his first game pitching-wise against the Chicago White Sox on Sunday. So ready to see Ohtani back on the mound and also back in the lineup hitting as well. Again, this guy's one of the dynamic players of the entire MLB. What he can do both ways. I'm excited to see him back and healthy and just doing his thing back with the Los Angeles Angels. So a little bit of MLB talk here to start off the Slaw Sports Show. And again, that's not traditionally generic in what we usually see, but that's what's the big news this week, is going back here and having baseball back is a big thing for a lot of people. Even though I'm not a baseball fan, still a lot of people are, and I know you guys come on the show and want to hear about it. But we got to get to a break, and when we come back, we're going to be switching now over to the NFL, diving into a lot of topics, a lot of headlines, and a lot of stories that I'm excited for. But again, we just got to get to a break, and we'll be back here very shortly on the Slaw Sports Show. All right, and welcome back to the Slaw Sports Show again. I'm your host, Cole Noble, a.k.a. Slaw, and we broke down some major moments and headlines from opening day in the MLB, and like I said before we went to our break, we're now switching to the NFL, and we got a lot to talk about, as always, in the NFL. That's always our biggest, subject line on the Slaw Sports Show. Big NFL show here on the Slaw Sports Show. So just looking through what we saw just today. In the NFL, the pro days for the college prospects coming up to the NFL draft is still continuing, rolling on. We had two more huge names and potential first-round picks have their pro days today, and projected somewhat to be one of the top linebackers off the board. On my big board, Slaw's big board, we have him at linebacker number 3, behind Micah Parsons and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. All three guys, I think, could be day one starters, immediate impact defenders for their team going forward. So Zaven Collins out of Tulsa had a good pro day today, had a lot of scouts there, interviewing him after seeing him work on the field and getting his numbers and measurables. And also Penny Sewell out of Oregon, what some to believe as a potential generational talent as an offensive tackle. He also had his pro day today. And if you haven't seen it on Twitter, he was out there running his 3-cone drill. That much weight moving that fast is going to be deadly once he gets into the National Football League. And there's a lot of talk about Sewell right now, where he's going to fall, especially with the quarterbacks really taking all the headlines right now in the NFL, or in the NFL draft. The top 5 quarterbacks getting all the headlines, potentially being the first, 4 of the 4 quarterbacks could end up being the 4 first picks of the NFL draft. And it's sitting there at number 5, the Cincinnati Bengals. They got an interesting situation there. Do they go with Jamar Chase and reunite Joe Burrow with his former LSU wide receiver? Or do they go Penny Sewell out of Oregon? Like I said, one of the top tackles in the class this year. Do they get that difference maker up front to help Joe Burrow, who's coming back from injury? A lot of different situations the Bengals can go there at 5. I still think the draft, of course, starts at 4. That's just my prediction. I think from what I've read, from what I've seen, and from what I think, the way I got the first round falling out in the NFL draft is going to be Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Trey Lance as locks for the first 3 picks. The draft starts at 4, of course, with the Atlanta Falcons. But again, at 5 with the Cincinnati Bengals, Sewell and Jamar Chase are the 2 options at that pick, in my opinion. And, of course, there's the potential to trade back from 5 as well. So, Zaven Collins and Penny Sewell today is our pro day roundup that we just wanted to hit on. 2 guys that were able to impress in front of a bunch of coaches, and 2 guys I thought had great days as well. So now let's get into the rest of the talk of what I kind of want to hit on today from what we saw this past week in the NFL. And first and foremost, let's start with the new agreements that are starting in the league this season. And first of all, it's going to be the 17-game season, which has been officially approved and was, voted in favor of by 31 out of the 32 teams. The only team that voted against the 17-game season was the Chicago Bears. And rightfully so. No one wants to watch the Chicago Bears for 17 games. Bad enough we got to watch them for 16. Now you got to watch them for 17. No one wants to see that, especially with Andy Dalton being their starting quarterback. We'll get more into him later. But 17-game season. Is it good or is it bad? I mean, it depends on who you ask. You ask the league. You ask the guys who are, wanting some money in their pockets. Good. Bring on 18 weeks of the NFL and 17 games of a regular season. That's more revenue coming in, especially with Roger Goodell saying he wants to see full stadiums this year. That's another game of full stands and more money going into the pocket of the NFL. Not to mention the TV situation there with advertisements. Of course, just getting the TV rights of who's going to telecast the game. Even more money going into the pocket of the NFL with the 17 game being added on this year. But then the flip side is the not good, and that's for the players who have already had issues with the length of NFL seasons, the amount of injuries that happen, the amount of injuries that happen to players after their time in the NFL, the growing CTE concerns. There's a lot of issues here with this 17-game season. From a fan, I mean, I don't like to see a 17-game season. I thought it was fine. It was 16. Even that was, in my opinion, a little too much at 16 games. So, but it is another game we get to watch on Sunday and on Thursday and Monday. If something happens, potentially even a Wednesday game again, who knows with the NFL. But I'm not in favor of a 17-game season. I don't really see the purpose of it, especially with the amount of players who are always resting late in the season. Doesn't make any sense from that scenario. I just thought they should have shortened the preseason to 2 games and kept it at 16 during the regular season and get rolling with the playoffs. But again, passed by 31 out of the 32 teams, so it will be a full go for this season. 17 games, and a new team has been added to everyone's schedule to fill in that 17th game. And for my Green Bay Packers, we got the Kansas City Chiefs added as our 17th game because we drew lucky number 7 and got the lucky magic last straw to take on the Chiefs at Arrowhead. Yay. So that's what we got going on. I don't know what the stipulation is going to be with the 17th game. Is that 17th team they play going to be added at week 18 at the end of the year? I don't think that's going to be an option just because of this game in particular. No way the NFL schedules Green Bay Packers against Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead on week 18. And again, it goes back to the resting starters thing. This game's going to get flexed to a prime time matchup at some point during this season because the NFL is going to love to have Aaron Rodgers against Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead. The two have never faced off at all in their careers. Throw back to the last time they faced off, we had Chad Henne, take it almost to the buzzer, almost to the end of the game against the Green Bay Packers at Arrowhead. This time, it's Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. Injuries permitting against the Green Bay Packers. So it's interesting how they're going to work out this 17-game season. I'm going to be interested to see what the fans think about it, and of course, see what players think about it during their interviews leading up to the season, see what coaches are thinking, all that kind of stuff. And the other issue with the 17-game season that's really been bothering me is the records. The all-time records, the single-game records, the single-season records, all of those now, single season especially, has an asterisk right there next to whatever number ends up going in there as the record book. Because you add a 17th game for a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who's routinely throwing 350 yards per game. A guy like Michael Thomas, the slant king himself, who's going to have 15 receptions off slants alone. Or even a guy like Derrick Henry, who was nearly last season broke the single season record for rushing yards. You're giving Derrick Henry a full another game to rush for 250 yards against the Houston Texans. Or not the Houston Texans, but a terrible team like the Houston Texans. Derrick Henry, no question about it, on a 17th game season, has very much the potential to break that single season rushing yard record. And because it's 17 games, because they played 17 games in the regular season, can you justifiably give them that record? And you think back, you think about the guys who currently hold those records. What do they have to say about it? Now, obviously, some of the records will not be broken that we see, even with the 17-game season, just because some of those records are just impossible to ever beat in the history of the game. But nevertheless, there's still some, like I talked about, a single-season passing yard record could potentially be broke this season. Single-game rushing yard record could potentially be broke. Single-season sack records, all of these records have the potential to be broke this year, and it's just going to be interesting to see what they really do with that going forward and how they work with these records if the players end up breaking them. And some other things that have gotten brought up, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles for the second year in a row, they brought up the 4th and 15 on the 25, placeholder instead of an onside kick, allow an offense to go for it on 4th and 25, or 4th and 15 on the 25 and convert that. And, just a one play, 4th and 15 on the 25-yard line. If they convert it, they retain possession and get the ball back. But if they get held, obviously the team takes over. So they're trying to get rid of the onside kick. I don't buy that. Onside kick is, I think, it's an electric thing to see. We hardly ever see it. And when it does happen, everyone's eyes glued on the TV. You got guys like Julio Jones out there on, the kickoff return on the hands team. It's an important part of the game, and it's a play that never really happens that often. And when it does, everyone's, when you're late in a game and you need an onside kick, you need the ball back to score again, to potentially win a football game or go in to tie it, and you get that first touchdown, it's always a great time to see the coaches sitting there rambling, scrambling on the sidelines. Are we going to go for it? Are we going to go for it? We're going to get the onside. We're going to go for the onside kick. Those kind of things is what I love to see with this. So Philadelphia, again, tries to bring this up for the second year in a row. I don't think it's going to pass. I think they'll keep the onside kick going forward. And the other thing that got brought up was the overtime, how they're going to change the overtime, because right now the way they do it is just touchdown wins the game, field goal off, the other team gets a chance to match it or score a touchdown of their own, and they will win the game. So instead what they're going to try to do is on the coin toss to start overtime, they're going to flip a coin, and whoever wins it gets to either call the spot on the field or whether they want possession of the ball. So if we think about just hypothetical here, let's go with the Kansas City Chiefs going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. So they're going into overtime, and the Chiefs go out and they call heads. The coin flip is heads. So the Chiefs now have an option. Do they want to spot the ball anywhere on the field, or do they want to take possession of the ball and let the Raiders take it? So let's say the Chiefs say they want to start on the 25-yard line, and now the Raiders get to pick, do they want to start on the 25-yard line on offense or on defense? So that's an interesting rule that I'm kind of back and forth on. I just think they should just traditionally keep it how it is. Coin toss, heads or tails, you get the ball, and the other team picks which side they want to kick off to. I think that's traditional, and that will work best in that regards for that agreement that's getting pushed forth right now. Don't really see too much of that side of it. But the other one that the Kansas City Chiefs actually brought forth to the NFL with this agreement is the number situation, the player uniform number thing that's going on right now. And this one is actually having a lot of backing by a lot of NFL players. And I'm actually 100% in agreement with this one as well. So what the Chiefs are saying is that they should open up what you're allowed to pick as your number on your uniform. You think about this is the same thing that goes with college in the NCAA with college football. You think back with Chase Young, especially, that's the first one that comes to my mind, being number 2 for Ohio State. Just seeing the phenom Chase Young, the Predator, coming off the edge, wearing a number 2 jersey. That's a scary sight and a half just with him. So what Kansas City's trying to propose is that defensive backs are allowed to choose a number between 1 and 49, opening up to the single digits. Linebackers get 1 to 59 and then 90 to 99. And then all skill players, so running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, get to choose between 1 to 49 and then 80 to 89 as well. This one I think is a great idea. I personally didn't see the reasoning behind it to begin with, not letting wide receivers be single-digit numbers, or not letting defensive backs or edge rushers be single-digit numbers. So I think this one, if it gets enough backing by the players, might end up getting pushed. And I think that this deal, or this agreement and potential deal, is a good one. I want to see Chase Young back in that number 2 jersey, flying around the edge, and see the wide receivers go back to being number 1 and number 2, like we're seeing with the wide receivers, most notably, again, right now, with Ohio State, just the first ones that come to my mind. So this one I think will get a lot of backing by players and might end up getting pushed forth going in to the future of the NFL and those kind of things going forward. And again, just some other NFL agreements that are trying to get pushed right now. And I think this one is also another one that has been confirmed, and it's going to be the international games. So the games in London, England, and the games in Mexico as well. We've seen them in years past. We didn't see them this past season because of COVID-19, but every year we always have the London game, 1, maybe even 2, and within the last 5 years, they started doing the game in Mexico as well. So the NFL is now saying that all 32 teams within the next 8 years will have at least one international game at some point within those 8 years, one season, they will have one game that is an international game. And as of right now, all 32 teams except for the Green Bay Packers. So only 31 of the 32 teams have had an international game. The Packers are the only team that have not played either in Mexico or in London. So it's always, never a neutral ground for the Green Bay Packers. So I'm interested to see what game we end up getting and, where it's going to be and when that will be for the Packers. But for 2021, the Atlanta Falcons will be the international team that they've set so far. They will be headed to London this season. Still no idea of who they're going to be playing, what week that will be, but we know that for sure that Atlanta will be going to London this season. And the NFL is still trying to, toy with other countries and other stadiums, and there's always been the big idea and the big push of the Jacksonville Jaguars potentially rebranding and going to London. So I still think with the world starting to open back up, some of these questions, some of these concerns might start coming back here, and the NFL might start trying to push and maybe even start expanding here 10 years down the line. So that one's going to be interesting to see. More agreements. One we talked about briefly was the full stadiums. Roger Goodell wanting to go back to having full stadiums for the 2021 season. Again, the world's coming back together. People are getting their vaccines and being smart about the whole COVID-19 situation finally. So see if we get full stadiums back. Hopefully we had the roar of the crowd and the atmosphere of a football game back in the NFL this season. And the other thing is the in-person workouts and off-season practices. Those will also now be in person this season. So no more Zoom workouts, Zoom calls, all that crap we had last year during the off-season. Teams are now allowed to come back to the facility for off-season and for training camp. This is going to be huge, especially for the rookies this year that are coming into the NFL just under 4 weeks away to the NFL draft. Having them there in person with their coaches, working out and building relationships with their team, that's something we missed last year and something that will, rightfully so, come back now with the world opening back up like I keep talking about. But fans coming back to stadiums and players coming back during the offseason is going to be great going forward for the NFL this season. So now let's get to the headlines of what we've seen this week in the NFL. Let's go with the big one that was actually a couple hours ago. Dan Snyder for the Washington football team has acquired the last 40.5% interest, becoming pretty much him and his family the sole ownership of the Washington football team. And with April 5th coming up, that's the deadline for, fan submissions for the new team name of the Washington football team. Do they keep it the football team? Do they go to the Red Wolves? What do they go with? The Red Tails, maybe potentially. But they're going to come back and reassess that next offseason. But Dan Snyder now has completely in all ownership of the Washington football team, and that's a kicker. And we all know that that's going to be a big storyline in Washington going forward, especially with that organization. And there's some more ownership scenarios that came up this past week, especially yesterday. The Sopranos with the Los Angeles Chargers, they're in a dispute right now that might end up with them selling the team. And all eyes right now are looking at Jeff Bezos of Amazon, because he's been the guy who, over the last couple of years, has tried to put his hat in the party to being an owner of an NFL team. And if the Chargers become available, Jeff Bezos might sweep in and be the new owner, and a guy that's going to bring an insane amount of money to the LA Chargers. And what more do they need? They already got that brand new stadium with SoFi, and as beautiful as that is, one of the best stadiums in sports, in my opinion. But being able to get Jeff Bezos in and just pumping all that money into the LA Chargers will be great, not only for the Chargers, but the league as a whole. So that's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on, see how that one plays out as well. With the current ownership for the Chargers, what they do they sell the team? And if they get to that option, does Jeff Bezos come in and try to, take control and be that guy going forward as the owner for the Chargers. So now some more actual NFL player headlines from this season, or excuse me, from this past week. And the first one we're going to start off with, we're going to San Francisco, keep things in California. Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers right now, back and forth clash, especially after the 49ers traded up to the number 3 overall pick. We all know you don't trade up to 3 and not take a quarterback, especially in this year's class. So Jimmy Garoppolo, he should know his time is coming, and the end is near with him in San Francisco. So San Francisco is, of course, exploring trade options to get him out before they eventually have to let him go or cut him, see what they can get for him. They put a first-round pick bounty pretty much on his head if any team wants to bite on that and trade for him. I'm looking at the New England Patriots. Not for a first-round pick. Wait to see if this number comes down a little bit. But the Patriots, I keep talking about as a team to look for Jimmy Garoppolo. But a first-round pick, San Francisco? I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't even drafted with the first-round pick. And from what we've seen from him, has nowhere near played like a first-round pick. I don't know where they pulled that number out of. It's just like the Jets putting a first-round pick initially on Sam Darnold. That number is now, by league sources down to, they might even take a 4th or a 5th round pick for Sam Darnold, much less Jimmy Garoppolo, a guy who, in my opinion, flat out stinks. That guy is not good at all, constantly injured. When he is playing, he's constantly throwing picks and, pretty much was led to a Super Bowl by Kyle Shanahan and that team and was part of the reason they lost that Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. So I get why John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have issues with him. I'm in that same boat of they need a new quarterback, and Jimmy Garoppolo is not the answer for San Francisco. So I think this first-round pick number will go down if San Francisco's smart. Right now, he's due $24.1 million by the 49ers, and the team will save $23.6 million if they can trade him before June 1st. So the time's ticking for the 49ers. And if they're going to keep or trade Jimmy Garoppolo, obviously a first-round pick they're not going to get for Jimmy Garoppolo. So my side of this story is it depends on number 3. And I've talked about this last week, what options that the 49ers have available to them at the number 3 overall pick. The hype right now is on Mac Jones. Not buying that at all. I do not see Mac Jones going anywhere near number 3. So, in my opinion, it's between Justin Fields out of Ohio State or Trey Lance out of North Dakota State. Justin Fields, like I talked about, if he gets drafted number 3, Jimmy Garoppolo's done. I think Justin Fields, compared to Trey Lance, is more likely to become a day 1 starter and an impact starter for the organization right off the bat. So, if that's the case, if they get Justin Fields as their guy, Jimmy Garoppolo's done. He will be traded before June 1st. But however, on the flip side, if they like the project of building Trey Lance and getting the high level of upside he has with that team and just the perfect fit, in my opinion, with that scheme with Kyle Shanahan and just that offense with the San Francisco 49ers, I don't think Trey Lance is a guy who can come in on day 1, but I do think he's a guy who can come in there toward week 7, week 8, come in halfway through the season like we traditionally see for rookie quarterbacks. So I think if that's the case, they hang on to Jimmy Garoppolo for 1 more year, maybe trade him by the deadline at that point, or just go into next offseason and try to work things out with him there. But at the end of the day, the headline coming out, the 49ers wanting a first-round pick for Jimmy Garoppolo, that's not happening. Not buying it at all. That number will go down tremendously even if they do find a trade partner for their current quarterback. Keep things with quarterback. The Chicago Bears had their press conference today. Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. Ryan Pace, their general manager, he came out and said 100% Andy Dalton is our starter for the 2021 season. A guy they went out in free agency and just signed on a 1-year, $10 million deal. Andy Dalton said that he signed with Chicago over other teams because they told him he will start. And now it is confirmed. And, the general manager for the Chicago Bears came out and said that, they weigh the pros and cons with all the quarterbacks available in the free agent market, and they believed that they were getting Andy Dalton and were confident in him to be their starter in week 1. So Andy Dalton will be starting over Nick Foles, a quarterback they traded for last offseason with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the former Super Bowl MVP back on the bench for the second year. And we'll just see what we get out of the Red Rider this year in Andy Dalton, the Red Rocket, now in the Chicago Bears uniform. I'm still think I'm not going to be comfortable seeing Andy Dalton with his red hair in any uniform that's not Cincinnati. But now with the Chicago Bears, let's just look at what they're getting out of Andy Dalton this year. A guy who had a 4-5 record last year as a starter with the Dallas Cowboys, threw for 2,170 yards and a 14-8 touchdown interception ratio. All of that coming in relief for Dak Prescott after he went down with a season-ending ankle injury. So Andy Dalton had a lot of good games last year. I'll flat out admit it. There's some games that Andy Dalton was a good quarterback, and then there's also the games where he was a bad quarterback. And that's just the wishy-washy scenario I see out of Andy Dalton as a starter. And that's the exact reason I'm 100% confident in this decision, because at the end of the day, I'm a Packers fan, and I've talked about it last week. Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace will go down in the Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame, and they're furthering their case. They'll be up there on the Mount Rushmore statue right next to Jay Cutler on the Packers Bears Hall of Fame. Mount Rushmore we got going on. So Andy Dalton, he's going to be the starter over Nick Foles. Sure, why not? As long as it's not Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson is all I care about as a Packers fan. But we'll see what happens with Chicago. A guy that I'm really looking forward to in their offense is going to be Darryl Mooney next year, because that guy was a stud last year in his rookie year. The problem was Mitchell Trubisky couldn't give him the ball. This Darryl Mooney ran great routes last year. He was constantly beating coverages and was constantly wide open, constantly overthrown by Mitchell Trubisky. So I want to see if Andy Dalton turns that around for him in his second year and really get some attention brought to his name. And again, of course, they also have Allen Robinson back on the franchise tag. If he, is fully with the team, they don't end up trading him, and he is the starting wide receiver 1 to start the season. 2 good options there at wide receiver for Andy Dalton to look at with that offense. And just some more quarterback headlines. We got 3 more just to talk about before we go take a quick break. But the Houston Texans, they are potentially willing to explore Alex Smith if they end up going through and trading Deshaun Watson. With all the allegations going on right now with Deshaun Watson, that's an interesting scenario to see what happens with him going forward. It looked like that he would end up getting traded by this offseason. But right now, I think a lot of the teams, there's still teams that are calling the Houston Texans right now. But I think they're going to wait for this investigation with Deshaun Watson to potentially settle and see what the outcome is going to be with the allegations coming out against Deshaun Watson. But if the Houston Texans do trade Deshaun Watson to another team, like I said, Alex Smith is going to be an option that they will consider to be their quarterback. And that's an interesting one. I mean, in free agency, they went out and signed Tyrod Taylor. They went out and traded for Ryan Finley, who had a couple good games last year for the Cincinnati Bengals. So they brought in 2 quarterbacks now already with Deshaun Watson in the room. I don't see how they could also go with Alex Smith if they trade Deshaun Watson. I think they already got their guy in-house for at least 1 year, a stopgap guy in Tyrod Taylor. I want to see what he can do. He was dealt terrible cards last year with the LA Chargers. I want to see if he redeems himself next year and if he's the guy with Houston if Deshaun Watson moves on. And another offseason free agent pickup quarterback is Ryan Fitzpatrick. And we've talked about all these guys with our free agent episode. But the Washington football team and Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's going to go into the season as quarterback 1, but head coach Ron Rivera said that he will have to fight and compete for that job. This is Fitzmagic we're talking about. Guy who had 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and a big beard coming down. He doesn't care about anybody, much less what Ron Rivera has to say about fighting for his job. As soon as he walks in that door with his swagger, that's Fitzmagic's job, in my opinion. And that's all I have about it. Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke, they don't have a chance. That job belongs to Ryan Fitzmagic with the Washington football team. We're looking to go Washington playoff team, Washington NFC East champion team for year number 2 with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And that's all I got to say about that one. And another quarterback news to talk about here, and this goes back to what we were talking about kind of sort of with the players changing number situation that the Kansas City Chiefs have brought up to the league. But Jalen Hurts, quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, has changed his number. He's going from number 2 to number 1. So he is QB1 literally going into next season. He's going into the season as number 1 on the depth chart, number 1 on the chest with the Philadelphia Eagles. And Jalen Hurts will have a big season ahead of him, especially with what the Eagles have draft-wise. Don't see anything happening this year, but next year they have the capital 2 first-round picks to potentially trade up if Jalen Hurts does not impress them this year and select a quarterback next year. So Jalen Hurts, all eyes are on him as QB1 again, literally, with the Philadelphia Eagles. See what he can do with that offense. Jalen Hurts, I've always said it ever since his time in Alabama, ever since the time he went over to Oklahoma. The guy's a winner at heart, and I'm excited to see what he can do with a full season as the starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. We got to take a break. We'll be back here on the Saw Sports Show. When we come back, we're going to just run through 4 quick teams that in the NFL that I think need to show some kind of improvement going into this season. So grab some popcorn, refill your drinks, do whatever you need to do. But we'll be right back here on the Saw Sports Show. All right, and we're back here on the Saw Sports Show. Wrapping up here pretty much the last 12 minutes of the show. And like I just said before we went and took a quick break, teams that need to see some kind of improvement going forward this season. Let's start off with the Atlanta Falcons and the NFC South, a team who last season finished at 4-12, atrocious record, defensively awful. Offensively, pretty decent, but it was just that defense that continuously destroyed them last season. And now Atlanta's sitting at the number 4 overall pick going to the draft in April. Atlanta has an option here to go quarterback, find the replacement of the future for Matt Ryan. They can go Kyle Pitts, which was my pick in my 2.0 mock draft, the tight end out of Florida, who is one of the best pass catchers in the entire draft this year. They can go offensive line, or they can trade back and go defense. A lot of scenarios, and that's why I say the draft starts at number 4 with the Atlanta Falcons. But why do they need improvement? I think that the Atlanta Falcons need improvement going into next season because at the end of the day, Matt Ryan is here to stay until at least the 2023 season. He's here for this year, and he's here for next year. So I don't see a scenario where you draft a quarterback at number 4, especially in my pick of having Trey Lance go 3. He's the project guy. You're not going to draft a starter or a guy who could be a starter in his first season when he's not going to play for the next 2 years if you're the Atlanta Falcons. It just doesn't make sense. Maybe I'm in the minority about this one, and from what I see, I am. But I don't get this with the Atlanta Falcons going quarterback at number 4. I think instead they go defense, address that side of the ball, and trade back, or they go Kyle Pitts and just make their offense absolutely elite. The type of offense no one can stop. It doesn't matter what you do on defense. A Kansas City Chiefs level of offense, if you add Kyle Pitts to that mix, pick up a running back in day 2, and then have Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, Kyle Pitts, and then you got Matt Ryan for the next 2 years throwing to those guys. And not to mention Arthur Smith, who in my opinion is one of the most underrated offensive masterminds in the entire National Football League, coming in as your new head coach this season. There's a lot at stake for the Atlanta Falcons in order to get right this season. And especially when you think about their division just keeps getting better. We'll have to see what we see out of the New Orleans Saints, but the Carolina Panthers could potentially also land a new franchise quarterback and what they've got building with Matt Rule in Charlotte. And, of course, the Super Bowl champions, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're not going anywhere until Tom Brady goes somewhere. And that guy has been battling Father Time for 5 years now, and he's not slowing down, continuing to win Super Bowls, now with Tampa Bay winning Super Bowls. So this division is getting a lot better and a lot faster for the Atlanta Falcons, and they need to show some kind of improvement going forward into this season. So the next team on my list that needs to see some kind of improvement is the San Francisco 49ers. We've talked a lot about them already and talked about, the Jimmy Garoppolo situation, what they do at quarterback. But that's not my concern. My concern is not what they do at quarterback. With the 49ers, my concern is, was last season 6-10 record a fluke, or was 2019 Super Bowl season a fluke? That's the answer that the 49ers have to answer this year. And obviously, can they answer that this year? That's going to be determined with a rookie quarterback. But the way they determine that is they got to get this quarterback pick right. They're sitting there at 3. Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, in my opinion, will be on the board at 3. That's an important decision for John Lynch to make, and he has to home run, slam dunk, nail that pick at 3. In order to have improvement with the 49ers, because the cast is there, the scheme is there, the defense is there for the 49ers, and they showed that in 2019 going to the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. But last year, 6-10, it brings questions, and we need to see some kind of improvement in 2021, especially with that rookie quarterback under center for the 49ers. So that's my second pick of a team that needs improvement. Now we're going to go to number 3, and we got the New England Patriots. This one is simple. Cam Newton coming back on the 1-year deal. Bill Belichick going out in free agency, spending, throwing money out left and right, throwing more money out than any other team in the NFL did in free agency by far, almost record-breaking the amount of money the New England Patriots spent this offseason. Was it enough? Was it enough for Bill Belichick to get over what happened last year at 7-9? Bill Belichick cannot have another down year with the New England Patriots. They need to have improvement this year. The number 15 overall pick is still up to a decision. Do they move up from there and take a quarterback if he falls, or do they just address best player available at 15? I find the draft so interesting to me. But at the end of the day, what the Patriots have done this offseason has to have some kind of improvement to go along with it. Cam Newton coming back on the 1-year deal, he obviously needs to show improvement from last season with what he did. And also adding in Jonnu Smith as a new big guy outside threat for the Patriots. Hunter Henry coming in as their inline blocking and, on the line, tight end. And then Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne coming in at wide receiver. You're going to run things back with Damian Harris at running back. You continue to get pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Jalen Mills coming in. You got Kyle Van Noy coming back. And, of course, Matt Judon got a huge contract to come in on defense. A lot of pieces for the New England Patriots, and they got to make sure they get them right this season in order to show some kind of improvement, especially when you look at the calendar. That Tampa Bay Buccaneer game against the New England Patriots at Foxborough, at Gillette Stadium. Tom Brady returns against Bill Belichick. That has to be the statement game for Bill Belichick and this team. And just they need to show some kind of improvement from 7-9 next season. And last but not least, the Las Vegas Raiders, my 4th team that needs to show some kind of improvement going into next season. 8-8 record, straight even for the LV Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders. And the Raiders at one point during the season last year, toward the halfway point, they looked like they were going to go to the playoffs. We looked like we were going to have Derek Carr and John Gruden going back to the playoffs. John Gruden going with his first playoff appearance, now back with the Raiders again. And then they just fell downhill. Lost to the Jets, and just bad losses were stacking back and forth for the Raiders. And at the end of the day, at the end of the season, they were back in limbo. And that's always been my phrase for the Raiders, is always being in limbo. And they've had, of course, questionable offseason moves. It's the Raiders getting in guys like Kenyon Drake at running back, John Brown at wide receiver, Yannick Ngakoue. What they gave him, I think it was $26 million total guaranteed, his full contract guaranteed on defense. Same year, same story for the LV Raiders. Questionable decisions during the offseason, limbo season, straight even during the regular season. So the Raiders need to make some kind of improvement here with John Gruden, because a 10-year contract, obviously this looked like a team that would potentially be, a long-term kind of work it out with John Gruden, will allow him to build his team. But he's still going in with the same cast here next season. And the time's ticking for John Gruden. Either his job could be on the line coming up in the next 2 years if the Raiders don't show improvement, or if they, have another limbo year this year, it might be time to blow it up. Trade Derek Carr, trade all your assets, go full tank, full rebuild. I mean, you still got another 5+ years after this season with John Gruden at head coach on that 10-year, $100 million contract. So just this needs to stop. The limbo, the questionable offseason moves, questionable draft picks, questionable signings, it's got to stop with the Raiders. And this year, if they can't show improvement, it's time to blow it up. And it's time to move on, time to rebuild, and focus on the future for this organization. So they're my last team I think that needs to show improvement, and that's all we've got here on the Saw Sports Show. So thank you all for joining me. Those who joined in live on WSOE 89.3, driving home here late at night at 10:57. Thank you for joining me. Those on YouTube at the Saw Sports Show, thank you for joining as well on the live stream. And of course, if you missed any part of today's episode, it will be posted on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, anywhere you get a podcast, you will find the Saw Sports Show. Just type in at Saw Sports Show. We're on Twitter as well, at Saw Sports Show. Very easy to find us if you're interested. So thank you again for joining for this week's episode. Covered a lot, talked about a lot, but had a lot of fun doing so. So thank you for joining. And for this week, for this episode, that's going to do it. So have a great weekend. Have a great holidays for those who are celebrating this week or this weekend. And have a great week forward going ahead. But here on the Saw Sports Show, that's all we have. So until next time, peace.